And coming up on this week's Green Signals, your railway podcast, HS2's £100 million bat shed and the real story behind it. The Jacobite steam train, again, is West Coast Railways considering another judicial review over central door locking? And Rail Minister Lord Hendy apologises for the tone of some of his letter to SYSTRA about engineer Gareth Dennis. And welcome to Green Signals in a packed week from me, Nigel Harris, and as per usual...
Well, me, Richard Bowker, but a slightly bunged up, nasally congested Richard Bowker today.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I hope you're feeling better soon. At least we can't catch it. We can't catch it over internet, Peter Kay might say. So we'll let you cough. If you need to cough and splutter, go ahead.
Thanks.
It's you that'll have to edit him out. And we've had another busy week this week. The first thing we want to talk about is a superficially funny but actually really annoying story that's been all over the papers and online since HS2 Chairman Sir John Thompson revealed at the Railway Industry Association annual conference in London last week that a bat shed, yes, to protect Buckinghamshire bats from colliding with HS2 trains is going to cost, wait for it, £100 million. We were all three of us at the conference at the time because we were streaming live from there the next day. I gawped in a full-on Lancashire dialect, and I have to say your face was priceless, Richard, when Thompson said that to conference host Natasha Kaplinsky. Now, here at Green Signals, we all have a huge amount of time for the media team at HS2 who are kept pretty busy all the time. And when we heard John Thompson start talking about this bat shed, we thought, there's a right big story there. That's going to spoil someone's weekend. And I think so it did, didn't it, Richard?
It did, yeah. Good Lancashire comment there. We did. Now, for a bit of context, the issue came up in the fireside chat that John Thompson was doing with the conference host. He was asked a question about the huge cost of building HS2, and in response, he made the perfectly reasonable point that the budget had been influenced by legal constraints and the demands of conflicting agencies, government indecision, the requirement, he said, for I think it was 8,276 separate consents from other public bodies along the route.
Astonishing.
It is. And we'll come back to that because it's actually the most relevant point arguably about this, except for the specifics on the shed. Because the example he gave was of the sheep house wood bat protection structure, which he called a shed, and he said was going to cost £100 million. Now, since that's an eye-popping number for anybody...
It is.
We decided to look into this one because there's been a lot of conflicting stories in the media since, as you would expect. And guess what, Nige? It's more complicated than it first appeared.
Quelle surprise.
But we thought we'd start by reminding everyone, or telling everyone if you haven't heard it, exactly what Sir John Thompson said about the bats at the conference. By the way, we're indebted to the Railway Industry Association for allowing us to play this clip from the conference. So here's what Sir John Thompson said.
Enjoy.
There are problems across the system, and then on top of that, there are some national and international issues for the UK as to face up to, which you want to get to later on about, well, why can't we build infrastructure in this country? I mean, that is a genuine problem, and I can bring it to life for you either now or later on.
Go on, do it now.
Well, so to build a railway between Euston and Curzon Street in Birmingham, I need 8,276 consents from other public bodies, planning, transport, the Environment Agency or Natural England. They don't care whether Parliament did or didn't approve building a railway because they represent the good people of Bedfordshire, or they're the Environment Agency, or they're protecting the Wildlife Act 1981, right? So what we're trying to do with the will of Parliament and money doesn't square with what they want to do, and that causes real problems. And I'll give you an example, right, because it's my favourite one, right? There's a section in Bedfordshire where the train will come out of a tunnel and it'll go alongside a wood. In this wood is Bechstein's bat. It's the most northerly area in the UK, Bechstein's bat. Not a protected species in Europe because it's generally pretty available in most of Northern Europe, Western Europe. But nevertheless, under the Wildlife Act 1981, it's deemed to be a protected species in the UK, this bat, even though there's lots of them. So we go to the Natural England and say, well, what do you want to do about this? And they say, well, you need to build a bat mitigation structure, we call it a shed. A bat mitigation shed. This shed, you're not going to believe this, costs more than £100 million to protect the bats in this wood, right? And therefore it's in accordance with the Wildlife Act 1981. And I need a licence from Natural England in order to be able to build said shed. So, okay, I've got the Natural England are on board now. They say, fine, we love this curved structure that protects the bat from the train. No evidence, by the way, that high-speed trains interfere with bats, but leave that on one side. So then we go to Bedfordshire County Council and say, would you like to give us planning permission for this blot on the landscape that costs £100 million? Of course, the answer to that is, you've got to be joking, right? Why would the good people of Bedfordshire like this eyesore in the middle of their open countryside? Well, they wouldn't, so they say no. So now I've got two different bodies. One says I have to do it, and the other one says no chance. So what do? I reached for the lawyers and the environmental specialists and hydrologists and so on and so on and so forth. It stretches out the time. I spend hundreds of thousands of pounds trying to do something, and in the end, I win the planning permission by going over Bedfordshire County Council's head. And those kinds of examples, I could give you loads of those examples. That's my favourite one because it involves this bat that I don't think is very rare. And people in this kind of have this simplistic way of saying, well, you've gone over the budget. Oh, yeah, okay, but do people think about the bat when they, all these... Sorry, I'm being trite about it, but I'm trying to illustrate one example of 8,276 of these I've got. They're not all like the bat. Some of them are, some are not. That just brings it to life for people, I think. And then they say, but it costs more. Well, yeah, of course it does.
So aside from building...
Blimey. So there you go. On the face of it, Richard, it does seem batshit crazy, doesn't it? I'll be preparing that one.
Do you write that one yourself?
I did.
That certainly has nothing to do with it. Anyway,
I've been chuckling myself since I amended your script and got it in. Batshit crazy. I'm going to say it again because I enjoyed it. He claims there's no evidence that bats are affected by high-speed trains, that these particular bats aren't protected anywhere else in Europe, and they aren't that rare in any case. So you can see why the mainstream media got all excited about it. After all, this is a 1 kilometre long mesh structure that will be built where the HS2 line emerges from a tunnel in Buckinghamshire to protect a colony of Bechstein's bats that he appears to suggest shouldn't really be getting everyone as exercised as they are. His tone was clearly one of mockery. Even the Secretary of State joined in then, suggesting this was the tip of the iceberg of the project's mismanagement and vowed once again to get a grip of costs.
Yeah, but before she got stuck in, first of all, in waded Natural England, who John Thompson had specifically referred to in what he said.
Waded was a good word there, Richard. And for those who don't know, Natural England is a statutory body established by Act of Parliament in 2006, whose stated and very clear purpose is to help conserve, enhance and manage the natural environment for the benefit of present and future generations, thereby contributing to sustainable development.
That's exactly what they're there to do. They were clearly irritated. In fact, I would love to have been a fly on the wall because I think absolutely steaming would have probably been the right thing.
There was probably one of those "he said what" moments in there.
Yeah, and then the coverage that his comments got.
Yeah,
because clearly the inference was they were being unreasonable, causing someone, in this case HS2, to spend money on something unnecessary. Now that'd be one thing, but I think quite unusual in this case for a public body. They actually did something about it, and their chief operating officer is a guy called Oliver Harmer. And in a blog almost immediately after the conference, he, on an official.gov webpage, by the way, he said this: there has been, and we'll put the link to this, by the way, on the website. There has been inaccurate coverage about Natural England's involvement in the development of HS2's Bat Tunnel. Natural England have not required HS2 Limited to build the reported structure or any other structure, nor advised on the design or the costs. The need for the structure was identified by HS2 Limited more than 10 years ago, following extensive surveying of bat populations by its own ecologists in the vicinity of Sheephouse Wood. HS2 has an obligation throughout the whole route to abide by legislation that exists to protect nature. Natural England and HS2 have a team that work closely together to ensure that this duty is observed, so the rail line can be completed without harming important wildlife. Now, then it gets interesting, or more interesting. He's then said, Natural England was consulted by HS2 on whether the proposed design to mitigate the impact of the railway on rare and protected bats was sufficient to comply with environmental law. We advised that it was.
Okay.
But it is for HS2 Limited to make choices, consider risks, and factor in costs when deciding how to comply with environmental law. That could be by choosing a route which avoids species and sites protected for nature, or by investing in mitigations to limit the harm when the route passes through sensitive sites. Bechstein's bats are a highly protected species across Europe. They are one of the world's rarest bat species, with fewer than 10 estimated breeding colonies in the whole of England. There is ample evidence, despite claims to the contrary, that they are at risk of colliding with high-speed trains. That is what he said. It's pretty high-octane stuff, I think.
It is, and given the speed of response on a government website page as well. So, we unleashed our secret weapon, and Steph did some digging and discovered that these bats are indeed a protected species across Europe, and they are specifically listed in the Berne Convention on the Conservation of European Wildlife and Natural Habitats, an international treaty which protects species and habitats. To be clear, this is a binding international legal instrument, which means the bats are protected under UK law. Further, it's listed on, here we go, Annex 2 of the EC Habitats Directive, which requires designation of special areas of conservation, SACs, to promote important populations. It is also a UK Biodiversity Action Plan species, which means that it is a conservation priority on both a local and national scale. Forgive the word soup there, but in plain English, these bats are rare and they are protected. And when you look at the website of the Joint National Conservation Committee, the JNCC, there is Bechstein's bat, specifically listed in Annex 2 for species that require a special area of conservation. What on earth is Sir John Thompson up to, Richard?
There's a lot of unpicking to do here, isn't there? So we asked both HS2 and Natural England some follow-up questions. They're both really helpful, as usual. HS2, we always expect that. Natural England, we haven't spoken to before, but they were great. So it's worth comparing what John Thompson said with what we've discovered, including as part of this Natural England's responses.
So shall we go a bit that's life on this one, Richard? I'll be Sir John Thompson and read out what he's said, and you can come back with the various responses for ease of understanding and clarity. Shall we have a go at that?
We'll have a go.
Right.
Go on then.
I'm now in Sir John Thompson's trilby. There's a section in Bedfordshire.
No, the site of the bat structure is actually most definitely in Buckinghamshire.
In the wood is Bechstein's bat, not a protected species in Europe.
That's incorrect. It is protected in both the UK and Europe. It's covered by the Berne Convention, and Natural England point out that in the UK, because I'm not entirely sure what the consequences of Brexit are, by the way, but in the UK, it is specifically listed in Annex 2 of the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2017.
It is genuinely pretty available in most of Northern Europe.
The European Environment Agency lists it as a vulnerable species. And if you look at the EU conservation status map. Only in the eastern half of France is it shown in green. Everywhere else it appears yellow or red, and red means, quoting here, the species is not maintaining itself on a long-term basis and is not viable.
It is deemed to be a protected species in the UK, even though there's lots of them.
Well, Natural England say that Bechstein's bat is a particularly rare species in the UK. This was the most northern colony. This is the most northern colony of them. And as such is listed specifically in the legislation, and as such is afforded the highest protection. By the way, there are not a lot of them in the UK. Now, there is a thing called the IUCN, or the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And we did find a reference on a bat monitoring website, which I think is a Spanish thing, that said, according to the IUCN Red List, it, i.e. Bechstein's bat, is considered near threatened with a declining population trend. The species is protected by local laws in different countries, as well as by Eurobats, the Berne Convention, and the European Union's Habitats and Species Directive. Although it is considered quite common in Central and Northern Europe, Bechstein's bat is considered very rare in the southern part of its distribution. Though it's not clear when he said, even though there's lots of them, whether he meant in Europe or in the UK. But anyway, HS2 has to comply with UK law.
We go to Natural England and say, what do you want to do about this? And they say you need to build a bat mitigation structure.
Natural England say absolutely not what happened. They said Natural England has not required HS2 to adopt this structure, nor advised on the design or cost. HS2 themselves identified the need for the mitigation structure through field surveys that were conducted and interpreted by their own ecologists. Our input with this project was only ever to advise on whether the proposed mitigations would work, as is our duty under the habitat regulations.
There is no evidence that high-speed trains interfere with bats.
Actually, Natural England say there is plenty of evidence to suggest that they do. We asked them where they were getting that evidence from. They pointed us to HS2's own environmental statement from 2013, which says, in section 7.5.6, where the route of the proposed scheme bisects or is located in close proximity to existing features known to be used regularly by foraging or commuting bats, there is an increased risk that bats could be killed or injured as a result of collisions with passing trains or associated turbulence. Those are HS2's own words in their environmental statement in 2013.
But it doesn't end even there, does it, Richard? With this tsunami of errors, contradictions and misleading claims, we understand that having got Natural England happy with the proposed structure, HS2 Limited submitted a planning application to Bedfordshire County Council to build the agreed structure. And the council said, if I might put it simply, in your dreams.
Well, that's what he said, yes. Now, he refers to the shed in that speech, which everybody's just heard, as a blot on the landscape, which is, I say that's ridiculous, right? Because this is what his own team and contractors designed after clearly a great deal of optioneering and public consultation. And again, he keeps saying Bedfordshire. It's not Bedfordshire, it's Buckinghamshire. HS2 doesn't go through Bedfordshire. You could say, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. It does matter. These are facts, and to get the county wrong is bad. Now, there are a few other interesting points very quickly. This is a big old structure, Nigel, right? It's 4 tracks wide, HS2 tell us. Why? It's making provision for future, I think it's east-west rail lines. Sounds sensible. Build it once, build it right. Okay.
Absolutely.
But it's big. Now, from what we have found, Buckinghamshire.
Not
right?
Bedford.
No. Council actually took umbrage at HS2 chopping trees back down the side of, I guess it must have been Sheephouse Wood, where the bat shelter will go in preparation, and attempted to stall the process by putting a TPO, a tree protection order, preservation order in place. So then HS2 took them to the planning inspectorate and won. So that's what we've been able to discover.
But so the whole thing, as so often is the case, Richard, is just a bloody mess in many ways. So let's list some of the ways, shall we?
Yeah. Well, I think there are. You try and pull this all together. First thing I would say is ecology matters.
Agreed.
Okay? You can't say, oh, sod the bats or just chop down the trees. The railway's far more important. Well, not to some people, it's not. And we have as a species demonstrated we're pretty poor custodians of the natural environment in the past. So someone needs to look out for it. And so let's be clear, ecology matters. And the kind of tone of what he said was kind of, it's all a bit tiresome. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think that's key.
I am. Yes, I do.
There does, however, need to be a balance, would be my view. Because if you take single issue activism on one particular thing and not taking account of other things is rarely the best way forward. So I do think there needs to be some balance. But today, as in, November 24, bats are protected species. It's the law.
So you cannot just ignore it, mock it, or try to blame somebody else.
And HS2, a company, have not tried to ignore it.
No.
They have done. In fact, I'd go further, actually. I think in so many ways, HS2 have demonstrated as a company exemplary approaches to environmental impact assessment, the creation of green habitats, the protection of, green corridors, the protection of habitats.
And yet you've got the chairman taking the pee.
Well, it does. Yeah, it absolutely comes across like that. And by the way, there's one other thing. I think I saw somebody say, oh, well, they should just sit down in a room and sort it out. Well, can you imagine if the chair of HS2 and the chair of Natural England was sat in the room and did a deal around Bechstein's bat? The judicial reviews would be flying in so fast you wouldn't be able to blink. So, HS2 have taken this seriously. And I don't think it's not helpful to sort of be sort of as flippant as he has been.
I understand his frustration, Richard. I mean, the number that you quoted with Vulcan specificity earlier on in there, that there's 8,276 organisations need to give consent, is mind-boggling. And that must have driven somebody demented. Well, quite a company demented. Surely that's what ministers should be fixing. No one else can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I only quoted that number with Vulcan specificity because it's the number he said. But given the other stuff that was wrong, I don't know. But it is the stuff that ministers should be doing, right? So I think there's a view that when the Parliament passed the hybrid bill for phase one, that was it. Everything was sorted, right? And Thompson's making the point that is not the case. You've still got to go and get all this other stuff. And I think there's a big issue there to reflect on, because if the government wants to do stuff fast and improve the planning process, this is an issue, right? The one thing I take some exception to, I think some people will take some exception to, in Sir John Thompson's bit with at the RIA conference, he said, just because Parliament wants the railway to be built, having passed the hybrid bill, all these other people don't want it. How does he know? All they're doing is discharging their statutory duty, right? So to say, we want to build a railway, but everybody's trying to stop us. No, what they're trying to do is do their job and do it properly. So you can't say that, but it is an issue if you want to get these projects done in the future, definitely.
How does he know? Has he asked them all?
Well, I don't know. But I honestly can't remember a sort of a moment like this. You can understand the frustration. HS2 are getting kicked for cost overruns and all the rest of it. But a large amount of what he says in that film clip is either wrong or misleading, right? There's no other way around it. And don't take our word for it. Take Natural England, just read what they said, right?
Who couldn't have acted quicker, could they?
No, and I can't remember the last time another public body basically stuck the boot in quite that way. So, it's the whole thing is, as you rightly say, it's a mess.
I think we should maybe move on, should we, Richard?
I think we should. I think
we've exercised that one to We'll see what people think. I'm doubtless we'll get plenty of comments in the comments on boxes.
I'm sure we will.
On YouTube.
I was just about to say, I think we've done bats to death, but I realised how inappropriate that comment would be. So, yeah, let's move on.
Batshit crazy for the third and last time this morning. Let's talk about something else that came up at the RIA conference, and that's Rail Minister Lord Hendy's speech, but particularly the Q&A session which followed it. Lord Hendy, Peter, was asked by a delegate from the Press Association in relation to the letters he wrote to SYSTRA about engineer Gareth Dennis and Euston, and here is what Lord Hendy said.
Lord Hendy, Neil Mansfield from the Press Association News Agency. Lord Hendy, in relation to the letters you wrote to SYSTRA about Gareth Dennis and Euston, do you think those were appropriate, and do you have any regrets?
So, safety is an absolute priority for Network Rail. When I was the chair, still is for the railway, and actually we've always acted quickly when concerns are raised by the regulator or through SYSTRA, anything. The article in question, in the case of Euston, there was an ORR improvement notice in 2023. We responded to it with alacrity, and it was closed out before the end of that year, months before the article. What I would say is that those of you who read my letter, there was a sentence at the end where the tone of it fell well short of what should be expected, and for that I apologise. And what I would say is that no contractor has or will be penalised for employees raising safety concerns about safety, whether they raise them through NR, ORR, the DFT for that matter, or confidentially through SYSTRA if that's what they want to do. The employment decisions about the person concerned are a matter for his employer, and that's really all of us.
Sounds like you were expecting that question.
So, off the top of my head, it seems a long time in coming, a reaction like that, doesn't it? And I might just been cynical, but it sounded very scripted by officials somewhere. Or am I being cynical?
Well, whoever scripted it, no, I don't think you're being cynical. It did sound very prepared. In answer to your first question, is it a long time coming? Yeah, too long. I mean, they've kind of messed this up. If you're going to make any form of apology, and maybe we'll come back to whether it was an apology or not in a minute. If you're going to make any form of apology, you do it quicker than this. So it feels as if it's now been kind of forced out, and I don't know. They'll probably go, "Oh, we've drawn a line under it now," but I just think it's actually not.
It's
not
also,
very
I mean,
well handled.
You're right. I mean, the classic rules of political apologies or any apologies, but, domestic relationships or anything else, if you're going to apologise, do it quick, mean it, and then move on. Yeah. But you're not allowed to move on, really, unless you've done it quick and meant it. It wouldn't be the first time, I guess, that a minister had been maybe told to shut up by government or the civil service or whatever, because Peter, in the past, when he's put a foot wrong, has tended to apologise quite quick, hasn't he? There have been a number of occasions. But, I mean, it has been a mess. And at the time, we said on this podcast that the last two lines of that letter, with this sort of, which were interpreted as an implied threat to SYSTRA's continued involvement on the railway, was unwise.
I think we said they were ill-judged, weren't we? Very ill-judged. He said they fell well below the standard or whatever it was that's expected. Yeah, you're right. They did. Shouldn't have said it. And it was the wrong thing to say. But what he's apologised for is the tone of that sentence. And I think Gareth himself put something out saying that that's not an apology, that's a non-apology. So you could argue it's not. It's kind of maybe drawn the line under it in the government's mind, but it hasn't in other people's. So. But look, we'll have to see how it plays out. What did you think of the speech itself?
It was just full of politics and motherhood and apple pie for the railway, wasn't it? Again, I had the sense that it was a speech that had been prepared for Lord Hendy. I've known Peter many, many years, and his speeches normally are perkier, sharper, funnier. than that, and also say meaningful things. I just got the impression it was government fare, which as he's now taken the government shilling and is now a minister, he has to toe the line and say. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I thought if I'd have actually gone to ChatGPT and said, write me the Rail Minister's speech in the style of a minister of the last 3 months of this government, that's what it would have come up with. It got better in the Q&A.
It did, but that was more Peter than what had been written for him, I guess.
But the speech I thought was,
I think I mentioned once in the past when Kim Howell was a rail minister, I chaired a conference and there was a long silence when I'd introduced him. And he just visibly ripped up his speech in front of him and said, no, that's nonsense. And I'm going to talk what I want to talk about. And I can remember now the two officials at the back of the room having kittens. Thinking,
literally in tears, probably.
What is he going to say now?
Yeah.
But look, let's hope Peter knows his stuff. He's been around a long time. He's a seasoned professional, and let's not forget that he is, what's the word? He's full of guile and experience. And let's hope that behind the scenes he's managing to enact influence to move our railway forward, whatever the civil servants want him to say in public.
Do you know, there's one thing that drives me mad about politicians these days, and I'm not having a go at this particular government, by the way. I think it kind of started really with, or it came to my mind during the Blair years, because I think it was Alistair Campbell's sort of approach, which is you get your 5 or your 10 key messages and you repeat them, right? And Blair did it, Brown did it, Cameron did it, certainly Johnson did it, Sunak's done it, and now these guys are doing it. And you get these kind of just these phrases, these lines, fixing the foundations. If I hear that one again. And actually, I think as an industry now, from a rail minister, what we need to hear is what they're going to do about it. What I want to hear them do is create leadership in the industry, anoint someone to say, you are now the chief executive of Shadow GBR, and then empower them to get on and sort stuff. And that's the bit I've still not heard. So
I agree. Well, let us hope that behind the scenes, Peter, if you're watching, you're managing to leverage some of that many years of experience and make that happen, because we're all gagging for it and to fall in line behind it, aren't we, Richard?
Indeed.
We are. So let's move on again. And it's worth mentioning at this point that we were absolutely delighted, not to mention I have to add, terrified, to have been invited to present a live podcast from the RIA conference, for which we were joined by Chris Green, who some lovely people on YouTube. You
don't get your teeth in this morning, right?
Can't make them work, Rich. Described as railway royalty, and quite right too. Very fitting. We broadcast the discussion live on YouTube without the aid of a safety net, and it seemed to go all right at the time. But if you missed it, you can still watch the recording on our channel or listen to it on Spotify now. It also includes something we didn't expect, did we? And that was a very pleasant little interview that Natasha Kaplinsky, who chaired the conference, did with both of us. It was good fun, wasn't it?
It was good fun. It wasn't expected, but no, enjoyed it. Can I just say, you say without the aid of the safety net. We did have the safety net. It was Steph who did, I have to say, a monumentally brilliant job at learning how to be and then doing the role of a TV production director in about 2 hours. But the good news is we know how to do it, so we'll be able to do some more. But it was lots of fun, and Chris was brilliant, as you say.
I was not seeking to underplay Steph's brilliant contribution. What I meant was you and me were the ones who were sat there on stage in full view of the camera. If we'd dropped the ball and said something stupid, there was nowhere to go.
No, you're right. That's where the risk lay. I agree.
Other than Steph's thumb hovering over the big red button if we said something particularly stupid,
Yeah, yeah. She did have the benefit of a 20-second delay, but anyway.
But thanks to RIA for giving us that opportunity. It forced us out of our comfort zone. It made us learn a new skill, and we can take green signals on the road now, Richard, doesn't it? So it means that we're open to invitations to do live green signals broadcasts. Yeah. I hope I don't regret saying that.
No, me too.
From selected events, if we decide we can do it, so where to catch us.
Absolutely. So now on to something completely different. Now, you and I, Nigel, had the chance to visit the Ecclesbourne Valley Railway recently, which is a rather lovely heritage railway nestling in the hills around Wirksworth, Derbyshire. We've managed to edit the footage we took that day. We're going to be releasing the full video very shortly, hopefully next week. But in the meantime, here's a little taster of our day at the Ecclesbourne Valley Railway.
Enjoy.
One of the most significant challenges the line has faced since being reopened was a serious landslip that took place in 2023 at Duffield. The collapse of a retaining wall was caused by substantial volumes of water flowing downhill and saturating the clay at the top of the slope on which the wall foundation stood. The fix required strengthening works and the slewing of the track alignment at the foot of the affected section. It took 7 months to complete and reopened in June 2024, not least thanks to an anonymous donation of £10,000. We passed the affected area at slow speed as remedial works to bank and the property above are still ongoing. And after passing through the short tunnel in Duffield, we arrive at the Ecclesbourne Valley Railway's platform at Duffield Station, a station shared with East Midlands Railway, and from where connections can be made for services to Derby and stations to Matlock travelling north.
So there you go. And it is a great little railway, Richard. You're right. I was enormously privileged a few years ago when I was a driver on the Great Central to be invited to take a loco over there before they got their own steam traction. And we all learned the road and did several weekends running their trains. And it was great. They are a fantastic bunch.
Yeah.
But what's particularly worth looking out for in that interview is a physical thing. There's the most amazing photograph from the station overbridge showing this wood, which if you stand there and look at it now, there's a beautiful station and new buildings and tracks, and what an amazing job they've done.
It is remarkable, I agree.
But so I enjoy that. It's I always enjoy going to works, and I love that story about the fact it was meant to be a through route, and they just stopped at Wirksworth. So you've got that bridge at the top of the yard, a 3-arch bridge. It was supposed to be over a main line, and is now over a hedge shunt, and spent its life like that. So let us go on. And I have to say, there's not many things that render thee and me speechless, Richard, but this one quite managed it for a while. After many weeks now of not hearing anything of an update about the central door locking dispute between West Coast Railways operator the Jacobite steam train, and the Office of Rail and Road, rumours started to emerge that West Coast was considering fitting CDL to its Mark 1s after all. So we decided to ask them if this was true, and they said this, direct quote: West Coast Railways is in ongoing talks with the ORR on its current dispute over the necessity of fitting its Mark 1 fleet with CDL. West Coast Railways is considering options to ensure that its future services run as planned, with its full timetable being realised. It is the operator's hope that a resolution with the ORR is reached shortly, allowing it to operate its services with traditional Mark 1 carriages. We will not be releasing further details at the time. So we did ask whether they wanted to come on the show to talk about it, but they declined for the moment. However, we discovered something else interesting in the meantime, Richard.
We did. Now, there's an article in this month's Trackside magazine. It's that sort of a heritage rail magazine.
Jolly
Excellent.
Good read.
It is a very good read. And it's issue 41, if you want to look it up. And the article says that West Coast Railways could consider another judicial review.
What?
And not only that, there's a discussion with the chairman of West Coast Railways, David Smith, who told Trackside this. He said, they, i.e. the ORR, still haven't made a decision over the new exemption application they submitted in March. Okay? They've still not made a decision. He said, I'm expecting them to say no, but I think they don't know which way to jump. He then went on to say that if ORR continues to refuse the application to continue running their Mark 1s without CDL, then quotes, we have the opportunity to go back to court.
Wow.
Now, he also told Trackside that reports, or certainly Trackside reported that rumours they were fitting some of their Mark 1s with CDL were not true. And despite the fact that they're having to operate with a reduced pool of air-braked locomotives because they can't use their Mark 1s, he says that they could, quote, sit tight for the next 2 or 3 years if we want.
They don't know which way to jump. I mean, the legal system has spoken, hasn't it?
Well, not quite. So,
well, in the first judicial review, it did.
That was clear, right? So the judicial review that West Coast Railways brought against ORR's original decision was found very strongly in favour of the ORR. Okay, so that was clear, and as a result of that, immediately ORR removed the exemption, and so straight after that, the West Coast Railways submitted another exemption application to ORR, and it is that which ORR have not yet formally and publicly opined on and said, this is our decision. And that's what David Smith is referring to here. He's saying, I don't think they know which way to jump, whether to say yes to us or no to us. It certainly would be very helpful if ORR said, this is our position, right? And we talked to Richard Hines about that on the interview recently. And I think he indicated it kind of coming towards the end of the process. But they do need to say, this is our decision. And once we have that, then it's clear, and then we can see what happens next.
And he's talking about another judicial review, effectively, isn't he?
Well, judicial review's an interesting thing. People think, oh, yeah, I just don't like the decision, so I'll judicially review it.
No.
Judicial review is not about getting a court to take a different opinion of the one that the public body took that you're not happy with. It's about, was the process followed? And if it was followed, is it resulted in a decision that is manifest error? No reasonable person could have reached that decision. So it's actually quite a narrow thing to do. But
it boils down to, it's not about the decision, it's was it reached properly?
Was it reached properly and in accordance with the process, and was the decision just completely bizarre in the context of that process? Yeah.
And so it goes on. We'll come back to it in due course, won't we?
We certainly will.
It's all that we can. And now it's time to thank everyone who's left us a super thanks on YouTube this week. And you all are Lorenzo Hermoso, Alan Kirkman, Chris Exley, and Paul Roberts. And Steph, Richard and myself absolutely appreciate whenever you leave us super thanks. So thank you very much indeed. They do help, and they are appreciated.
Absolutely. And also thanks to our new gold and silver members, who are Alan Green, Robert Cambridge, Malcolm DeBell, James Nichols, and David Shearers. And you can see all our members, to whom we're grateful, gold, silver and bronze, in the end credits at the end of the show. Just a quick reminder, if you're a gold or silver member, please do drop us an email to info@greensignals.org with your postal address, so we can send you your goodies that you get as part of your membership. If you are a gold member, you are entitled to 3 free issues of Trackside magazine, okay, which is the one we talked about a few moments ago, and it's a cracking read, so that's something you can get. One brief apology, if I may, Nigel, on behalf of the admin side of the business. We have been so manically busy with live streams, and Steph and I have been
producing new stuff,
and we've been in North Wales for 2 days. It's been crazy. We're a little bit behind on a few bits and pieces. So many of you have sent us your address details. We will reply to everybody personally. We just haven't been able to get around to them all yet, but we will.
Good to see David Shearers joining up there, a capable engineer in his own right, and I think editor of the Railway Engineer magazine as well. So there's a chap.
I believe so.
There's a chap who knows what he's talking about. And now it's time for this week's Railway News Roundup. The UK's first Intercity battery train trial has been successful. Doesn't that sound great? Angel Trains, Hitachi Rail and Transpennine Express have confirmed that the testing in the north of England has exceeded their expectations. Hooray! Demonstrating superior performance and cost-effectiveness compared with diesel engines. A trial has confirmed that single battery technology can reduce fuel costs by between 35 and 50% and enter and leave stations in zero-emission mode. The prediction before the trial was of a 30% saving, so that's great, much better news than they thought. Just that one battery powered the Class 802 prototype at more than 75 miles an hour, meaning it achieved all its journey times and performance requirements, and it operated solely in battery mode for 70 kilometres. Hitachi Rail will now move on to deliver the next stage of a full Intercity battery electric train, which they hope would have a range of between 100 and 150 kilometres. Great news, eh, Richard?
It's excellent news, and it was great to see that when I went
You went up and filmed that,
Steph and I went up and had a look at it. Yeah, it was really good. This one is not so good news. You know those help points you see at stations?
Those white drum-like things.
Yeah, I always think they look like a big white pill, like a big aspirin. And you've got a big button and you can speak to a member of staff. There are apparently, I didn't realise this, there are 83% of stations on the network, and passengers use them to ask for information about when the next train is, but they're also used for calls in emergency. The Office of Rail and Road has reviewed data from 21 station operators responsible for these help points at more than 2,500 stations, and found that they're actually not very helpful on many occasions. At a quarter of the stations audited, at least one help point was not working when inspected. Now, testing of the help points varies, so issues often aren't identified promptly, and not all operators collect and use data from calls to the help points, so they can't assure the quality of service of passengers using them. And they're also affected by poor mobile coverage in remote areas. So the ORR has asked station operators to review their monitoring of help points and carry out risk assessments for unstaffed or partially staffed stations, particularly ones that rely on mobile coverage communication. So, yeah, if you're going to have them, they need to work, don't they?
Well, particularly if you're on your own on a wet station that's not man miles from anywhere and you press a button, it doesn't work. That's going to be a real problem for you, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Fare evasion again now, and the Transport Secretary has commissioned a review into the way train companies tackle suspected fare evasion, according to DfT. This will include how clear terms and conditions are for passengers and how they're communicated, as well as when prosecution is an appropriate step. The review will be carried out by the independent regulator with ORR and will assess operators' enforcement and broader consumer practices in this area, including the use of prosecutions. Transport Secretary Louise Haigh said, "Make no mistake, deliberate fare dodging has no place on our railways and must be tackled, but innocent people shouldn't feel like a genuine mistake will land them in court. An independent review is the right course of action and will help restore passenger confidence in the system. It's clear that ticketing is far too complicated, with a labyrinth of different fares and prices which can be confusing for passengers. That's why we have committed to the biggest overhaul of our railways in a generation, including simplifying fares to make travelling by train easier." Now, in commissioning the review, the Transport Secretary encouraged the ORR's review team to draw upon advice from independent experts, including legal and industry specialists, as well as engaging fully with passenger representatives. And there are some great experts around who can help in that.
There are, and I think this is a good thing to have done. I think actually she's right to have done this. We've covered this issue before. Fare evasion is a big problem. So you've got to make sure you don't let the people who are committed to evade fares get away with it. But you've got these people who are adversely affected. Did you see the last bit of the release? No, it said officials at the Department for Transport will work at pace with the ORR to finalise the scope, timings and terms of reference. At pace, I'm looking forward to seeing what the DfT's definition of at pace is.
Well, you're right. I mean, you could say that you're being a bit cynical, Richard, but rightly so. It's one of those phrases that entered the political and journalistic lexicon some time ago, and you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And of course, it can mean anything. It's like affordable homes. All homes are affordable to someone at pace. Oh, sorry, it's just jargon and word soup.
And there's me thinking I'm the cynic. Right,
no,
okay.
No, I'm right with you on that
Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. So if in a week's time it's all done, great. No, come on. We got to do that. But if in a week's time it's done, then okay.
All right.
Actually, humble pie.
Fair enough. And that's the end of the news roundup for this week. If you'd like to send us any snippets of news, big news, little news, round you, other parts of the country, do let us know. We can't be aware of everything, so some stuff does slip under our radar. The best ones we'll use, and if we credit them to you, if it's one of yours, we'll read it out and give your name and name check whoever sends us an email on that basis. So I'm going to draw breath and shut up and...
Oh, I'm just going to enjoy that. Hang on. Draw breath and shut up. Oh, sorry. Oh, no, hang on. That's not what I was supposed to say, is it? Right. It's now time to do the quiz. Oh, grief. Right. So last week's question was this. What connects Arrowroot, Bilberry and Hazel in a railway context? We had some very creative attempts at this. They were all completely wrong, but fair play for having a go at them. But the correct answer was they were official Great Western Railway telegraph code words used to facilitate the transmission of telegraph messages, where just the one word would be used instead of a complete phrase. So, for example, Arrowroot means train alterations today, send times today. And Hazel means materials on order to be available for inspection. Attend to this immediately and reply. Okay, so they use these code words. So a lot of people got it, as usual. And the winner, drawn randomly from all the correct answers, was Ken Anderson.
Congratulations, Ken.
Absolutely. Well done, Ken. So if you send us an email to quiz@greensignals.org, we will get your mug to you. So to this week's question. And it's this. What possible connection might there have been between Gustav Eiffel, a steam locomotive, and the cup final? So if you think you know the answer to that, let's just say it again. What possible connection might there have been between Gustav Eiffel, a steam locomotive, and the cup final? If you think you know, answers to quiz@greensignals.org by Saturday, the 16th of November at midday, after which we'll put all the correct answers into a hat and draw one out at random.
At risk of being edited out, can I go off on a Lancashire tangent just for one moment, Richard, to see if you'd read it? Bilberry. Fruit, little fruit pies that bakers like Oddies in Burnley used to make. My gran always used to call them Wimberry. And she was like, did you ever come across that in Blackburn?
No.
Wimberry?
No.
I wonder if any of our readers have.
No, language changed quite significantly as you move through Accrington and Oswestwhistle, as you know. So I don't know. We speak the Queen's English in Blackburn, so clearly. So
of course you do.
I've not heard that before. That's very interesting.
That's very interesting. And her contemporaries who used to work in the mills said it as well. Anyway, there you go. This is a great story for us to end on. As part of the Northumberland Line reopening, signalling along the route between Ashington and Newcastle, no, I'm not going to make my football comment, is no longer going to be controlled from line-side signal boxes. Instead, it will be from a signalling centre in Newcastle. And of course, once all the bits and pieces that could be kept for spares went into storage, there was lots of redundant equipment that was heading for the scrap heap. And this is the good news bit of it. 3 groups working with Northumberland County Council stepped in to give these items a new lease of life. Woodhorn Narrow Gauge Railway, Northumberland Line Heritage Community Group, and Choppington, what a great name, Parish Council, have all claimed various items from the signal box at March's House and North Seaton to preserve them for future use. I like that.
I like that too. This is my kind of whimsical moment. So Steph and I have just been in North Wales in Bala doing some recording, and I had to drive because I've got all the camera gear, and I picked Steph up in Shrewsbury. And as I was driving into Shrewsbury to go to the station, you go past near where that big junction is, with that huge signal box. And there are still semaphore signals up there.
There are. It's a wonderful box.
And I must admit, I thought, oh, that's rather nice, actually. But anyway, there you go. But where they go, at least they're safe. And that is a great story.
Maybe we should do a little video about that box, Richie, because it is the biggest mechanical signal box left. And it is. I've been in it, and it's amazing view.
It's huge, isn't it?
It is. Well, maybe we ought
that'd be good.
Maybe we ought to do that.
We shall ask Network Rail nicely.
Do we know anyone at Network Rail in Wales and Borders who might be able to facilitate that? I think we do.
Quite possibly.
And sadly, that's all we got time for this week. Thank you so much, as ever, for watching or listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And if you really want to support us, find out about membership on YouTube or Patreon, for which you'll get all sorts of exclusive goodies. But of course, this show will always remain free. So most importantly, do join us again next week. Until then, it's goodbye and thank you for attending with us from me, Nigel Harris, and
from me, Richard Bowker.
Do come back again next week.